Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm Susanna Kidd in the studio here at Imperial College.
And I'm Isabella Eddington, coming to you via Zoom, and you're listening to Science at 1 at Imperial College London.
If you're joining us on YouTube Live today, please feel free to leave any comments or questions via the comment section or the chat so we can answer them during the show. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy what you hear.
This week we're going to be discussing wildlife conservation in honour of World Wildlife Conservation Day, which is on the 4th of December.
We will be hearing an interview with a researcher using sound to monitor bat populations, and Bella and I will be discussing the controversial topic of trophy hunting, exploring why the debate isn't as straightforward as you might think. To round out the show today, we will hear from our science correspondent Franco Pesci, who has been researching the most unusual animal stories from the past year.
And that's all coming up on Science at 1 today.
We also have some amazing upcoming musicians to share with you, but before we delve into all that, here's our science headlines of the week.
Today is a very exciting day for fighting the COVID-19 pandemic as the first vaccine programme begins. Margaret Keenan, a 90-year-old grandmother of 4, became the first person outside of clinical trials to receive the vaccine at 6:31 this morning.
This is really great news to give us optimism about the end of the pandemic, and Margaret was very happy with her early birthday present. She turns 91 next week. Happy birthday, Margaret. The Pfizer vaccine, which is being rolled out, needs 2 doses, 21 days apart, so the most vulnerable groups will start to be fully vaccinated just before the new year.
Also receiving the vaccine this morning was 81-year-old William Shakespeare from Stratford-upon-Avon, with headlines reporting, "This is the taming of the flu."
I'm sure the reporters had a lot of fun with that one. What a great way to end the year.
Now on to conservation-related news. Researchers have been monitoring the world's largest iceberg, A68A, which is on a potential collision course with South Georgia, a small island in the South Atlantic, which is a similar size to the iceberg.
The berg has mostly been monitored by satellite since it broke off from Antarctica in 2017, but recent improvements in technology have allowed the RAF to fly past and get more detailed photographs of its structure. It is thought that the iceberg will become stuck on the continental shelf just off South Georgia, where it might disrupt the feeding patterns of local penguins and seals.
That sounds like it could be quite problematic over the winter, but icebergs also bring a lot of ocean dust with them, which increases the amount of nutrients in the water and supports the growth of plankton, which will mean better quality food for the local ecosystems in years to come. There is very good news in the UK for UK wetland ecosystems this week. Beavers, which were introduced to Exmoor earlier in the year, have successfully built their first dam. This is the first beaver dam in England for several hundred years.
Beavers were reintroduced to Exmoor in January after becoming extinct in England in the 16th century due to hunting. So this is the first dam built here for more than 400 years, and it's created an instant wetland which will support other local wildlife, and it is hoped that beaver dams will also help to reduce flooding on farmlands downstream.
It's great news for the beavers and also great news for the farmers. This is the final Science at 1 for this year, but if you can check out iScience or Felix to stay up to date with science news, then feel free. But now let's listen to a lovely song before we hear some conservation stories.
We're back again with a science communication alumnus, Sylvia, who is known in the musical world as Sutra. Sutra is a Ghanaian and British artist and medical doctor based in London. Her creative work explores the dynamic power of voice and the art of storytelling as an act of individual and collective resistance. This song is called The Butterflies Are Free.
When all is said and done, what do you possess? And if fire burned it down, are you valued less, valued less? What am I chasing after? In this life, where's the answer? I am tired of comparing self to others. Spend my money, I'm so empty, what's the matter? I'm just a problem when I'm idling away. Money and possessions are my golden calf. I could give to charity, but I'ma keep the golden half. I'm invaded by more, contentment invades me. Fashion controls my emotions and safety. And I can help people around, but the money is major, so make sure you pay me. I have all I need, but then if it is new, you know I'ma pursue it. They claim it's unnecessary, but who cares what they say? This already, you knew it, I know. Maybe I'm trying to impress you. First impressions never change, so there's pressure. Stop stepping on too many clothes, I mean too many toes. That's including my own, but then wait, maybe this is all I know. Could you tell me what is the cost? Vanity, 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 losing my sanity. I'm kneeling down at the cross, buying my way to the top. To sleep alive, but woke up dead. Say the glory days are here inside of us. When all is said and done, what do you possess? And if fire burned it down, are you valued less?
If I place my hope in the clothes I wear and the hair I buy and the views I get, time I spend outside suddenly much less was a scary place, and I'm by myself.
Failing at pleasing the author that made me. I buy and I buy like I'm crazy. Worship all the things that can't save me, save me. Don't they know, they know, they know. Don't they know, they know, they know. Don't they know, they know. If the butterflies are free, what the hell you paying for, paying for? Don't they know, they know, they know. Don't they know, they know, they know. Don't they know, they know. If the butterflies are free, what the hell you paying for? Ooh, 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 hey. Yeah, hey, 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 hey. Good, good, good,
Where am I buying jeans?
So if I said, what advice would you give us, our generation?
That's what I'm trying to say. You save money.
Yeah.
You understand? That goes down. You wear 200-pound shoe, 500-pound dress, but then
And that was Butterflies Are Free by Sutra. If you'd like to find out more about that track, then you can go to iamsutra.com.
Now, as the theme of this week's episode is conservation, we'd like to bring our attention to a heavily debated conservation topic, trophy hunting.
Trophy hunting is something that's discussed by governments and charities across the world. Where most can agree that the act of killing is undesirable and unethical, there are social, political and economic reasons why the trophy hunting debate is not as straightforward as you think.
It's very easy to attack the rich white men who pay thousands of US dollars or pounds to partake in trophy hunting and then use them as the poster boys for the destruction of animals. However, the issue is much more complex than this. That's just the tip of the iceberg. For example, in 2015, 66 rhinos were actually killed by trophy hunters between South Africa and Namibia, but 1,200 were killed by poachers. Prince William actually publicly stated that there is a place for trophy hunting, and this caused a bit of uproar, so we're going to explore this further. So Bella, I wondered if you could kind of tell our listeners what exactly is trophy hunting.
So Save the Rhino defines trophy hunting as legal payment for a hunting experience and the acquisition of a trophy by the hunter. The hunted animal could be a lion, a leopard, elephant, or any other creature really. And the trophy is usually a head, furs, horns, or tusks. And trophy hunting is now a legitimate industry, and in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, it produces over $201 million a year for the local economies.
I'm sure we can all remember the case of Cecil the lion. there was absolute uproar when he met his end in 2015, and there have been public protests and government bans on the trade. But the debate is still ongoing as to whether it can be used as a tool for conservation, for which it is known as an acknowledged tool in many academic papers.
And lions are quite commonly hunted, aren't they, Susanna?
Exactly. So a prevalent threat to their survival is trophy hunting. But lions are also threatened by habitat loss, loss of food sources, and sometimes retaliation after predating on livestock. Since the 1970s, lion populations have declined by approximately 30%, and the distribution of lions has increased by over 82%. Trophies imported back to the USA account for approximately 60% of all lions that are known to have been killed for sport in Africa, which is just staggering. The ethics of killing for fun is seen as undebatable in most eyes. It is wrong to kill, but what if the death of an individual could actually ensure the protection of many more? So, Bella, let's work through some of the reasons that trophy hunting might be beneficial for biodiversity conservation.
Okay, so firstly, trophy hunting usually requires whole habitats to be conserved by landowners, which protects everything inside that area, from the smallest insects to giant elephants. Whereas ecotourism tends to focus on maximising the profit from individual animals for photography. In Zambia, there are a network of game management areas that are used for trophy hunting like this.
Yeah, because one of the main kind of arguments for banning trophy hunting and just letting kind of ecotourism and safaris and wildlife adventure take over is exactly that they don't kind of focus on increasing biodiversity on the whole. They just want that one kind of individual. So what actually is a game management area that trophy hunting use as their space?
So a game management area is an area that's semi-protected, so hunting is permitted there, but the wildlife and vegetation within it is conserved to a certain degree. They're usually communally owned, and many Zambians have requested that their degraded farmland and farm areas can be converted for this use. So hunting reserves are a more feasible use for depleted land than tourism is. And large interconnected game areas are better for movement of animals and gene flow. So in Zambia, there are nearly double the number of game management areas than there are national parks.
Yeah, I don't know about the listener at home, but I know when I first learnt this, I was completely flabbergasted almost, because I would always kind of think that trophy hunting would be something that conservationists were completely against. But when I was doing a bit of voluntary work in South Africa, I spoke to one of the guys that I was working with, and he said it's essential, otherwise all of the land would be converted into farmland, as you say, and then that means all the species that live in it would obviously be killed. Quite often you don't find this, and you find that local populations are against you do find this. So quite often local populations are actually against these bans on hunting. So what kind of reasons, Bella, might this be the case?
So in Botswana, there have been some cases where locals have opposed a hunting ban that was brought in 2006, because the ban meant that harmful predators were now able to prowl the villages at night. And when trophy hunting was allowed, they received financial assistance with community developments, such as the installation of toilets or taps. But now this income source is missing. Also, more animals are now being killed through retaliation from locals who've had their crops or property damaged. And if locals are likely to benefit from trophy hunting, then they're also likely to protect that wildlife and its habitat as a revenue source. And there are huge amounts of money to be made in it too, aren't there?
Yeah, so tourists obviously pay thousands of pounds to hunt a single animal, and this money can be injected back into local conservation projects too. However, the flip side of this is obviously that endemic government corruption that runs right through many African societies may actually prevent this money from landing in the right hands. Governments must obviously do better to ensure that the money is trickled back into the local community. Otherwise, we find ourselves in the situation where the local farmers are trying to feed their hungry family, or kind of, the local person, and they may turn to poaching, which is definitely paid for by organised criminals in China and Vietnam, two countries responsible for the bulk of the illegal wildlife trafficking trade. Namibia is actually one example where Prince William brought up, as they have a good track record and the money is definitely going back into local hands.
Are there any other reasons that you think hunting might not be discouraged?
Well, there are many other reasons, but other supporting arguments include the fact it is a rite of passage for Maasai warriors to kill a lion once approaching manhood, and the leftover bushmeat from hunts can be a viable food source for locals.
It's also not fair to remove that food source for populations if they can't afford an alternative, I guess. And it can also be seen as a Western intervention on Indigenous communities. Just because our societies deplore killing of certain animals, what's it to say that we have any right interfering in other countries' systems and traditions?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. So obviously the most obvious downside to lion hunting that a lot of people see is the pain and suffering that the animals have to go through. What else do you think is a negative of trophy hunting for people?
Well, the activity's popularity suggests that there are social issues that need to be tackled, issues like lack of empathy for animals and perhaps violent attitudes. There's also a major political problem highlighted in the fact that some people are having to depend on this as a source of income because there's a lack of infrastructure and education in the area. Though many people are financially assisted through trophy hunting, sometimes only a small fraction of profit reaches local communities due to corruption.
Yeah. And also, when an alpha male is removed from a lion pride, this I think is something that people wouldn't really realise, the void is filled then by an outsider male. This can then lead to increased rates of infanticide, which is when the new male kills any male cubs from the previous alpha male in a play for dominance over females. Often only males over a certain age are hunted so that the population has a chance to grow and genetic information can be passed on. Lions are also known as apex predators, so their removal has a profound effect on the rest of the food web, causing drastic ecosystem disturbance.
As well as all those negative effects, though, you have to consider that conservation can carry costs for locals too. So we see it as this amazing thing that everybody should be doing, but it can create areas of restricted human access. And people living in developing countries depend heavily on the local land for resources, homes and income. And if that land is being conserved, then they often lose out on potential benefits.
Exactly, and there is an argument for sustainable alternatives to replace the income from trophy hunting so that there is no incentive for locals to participate, and locals can then participate from the wildlife too. Although the concept of hunting these magnificent creatures is disturbing, it could be seen as unfair to local communities to immediately ban lion hunting. There may be large families depending on the trade as a sole source of income. How do you think this can be approached moving forward?
Well, improvements to conservation science methods will enable accurate measurement of the success of trophy hunting schemes, and increased regular censuses will allow more suitable hunting quotas to be defined, so it's a more sustainable practice overall. By increasing local control of the business, revenue will be shared more equally and locals can become better equipped to manage the operations. There's also scope for mutually beneficial cooperation between conservation bodies and trophy hunting ventures, with the aim of using hunters to cull individuals that are required to be culled for population control. There's also the introduction of trading restrictions in Western countries, which could reduce the demand and accessibility of trophies, and in turn reduce the number of lions that are killed for sport.
So, as we said, a very, very complex topic, and hopefully soon humanity will advance beyond being fascinated by the colonial pastime. But until then, better policing for the practice and financial regulation will benefit the industry massively. And by educating hunters and locals in the surrounding issues, we may eliminate the desire to hunt in the first place. The lions might even be singing Hakuna Matata in the future.
Thanks for chatting about that with me, Susanna. I think it's a really important topic that everybody should chat about at some point. We can only hope that a healthy medium is met at some point. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on wildlife trafficking after this song.
Of course, yeah, we'll dive into that. This song is a live rendition of Tropical Hornbills by J.M. Johar.
All right, everybody stand up, man. One, two, three, go! Nobody cares if you're sad or the frown that you have right now on your face. So you might as well take it off now. You take a pill or two, and even though I could put on both your shoes, it wouldn't change the fact that you are just a fucking grumpy dude. Show your gratitude, enjoy your solitude, and just be happy. Just be happy. Before you know it's time to let it go. Before you know it's time to say goodbye. And just a blink of an eye, just a touch of soul. You are the king of the hill. You're in control. And just a blink of an eye, just a touch of soul. You are the king of the hill. You're in control. Just a blink of an eye, just a touch of soul. You are the king of the hill. You're in control. And just a blink of an eye, just a touch of soul. You are the king of the hill. You're in control. Thank you very much.
I honestly felt like I was in a live concert just now. I missed them. That was amazing.
I know. So Susanna, tell me about wildlife tracking and its effect on conservation.
Gladly. So obviously with our theme of conservation, a lot of what surrounds that conversation is about the poaching of elephants and rhinos and a lot of African species that are exploited. So what I really wanted to raise our listeners' attention to is that actually often what's left out of the conversation is as important as what's in the conversation. And what I mean by that is that if we always focus on kind of the poaching of these species and on Africa and on the corrupt government and all the kind of awful acts of violence towards animals that go on there, then we actually possibly place insufficient emphasis on the trade and use of ivory or rhino horn. So what I really feel passionately about is that we've got to focus on the ultimate root causes of the conservation challenges that Africa face. So I grew up in Hong Kong, And in the geography of the illegal wildlife trade, it occupies a unique and essential position. It's a city that has built its reputation and economy as a frictionless connector of countries and capital, located on the doorstep of mainland China, which is the most ravenous wildlife market in the world. Despite 50% of all illegally wildlife trafficked trade, its current enforcement focuses on just prosecuting carriers or mules instead of actually going kind of to the root source of the problem and investigating and prosecuting the networks and the organized crime groups that are orchestrating the entire thing. And it's actually built a reputation for itself as a black hole or a safe harbor for activities, and they'll likely worsen unless the prevailing situation is really addressed. And my argument was that if we really kind of focused at the demand side rather than the supply end in Africa, which is often what kind of, is splattered all over our headlines, how many, and it's awful, the statistics, and I think they're incredibly important to highlight, but at the same time, we're not kind of giving enough attention, I feel, to what's going on in Vietnam, in China, in these places where really they're the ones exploiting the animals. So I have a few statistics that just highlight how grave the situation really is. And I think they'll be quite shocking for some people. So in just 14 months from January 2018, up to 44,757 pangolins were unsuccessfully trafficked in Hong Kong. Whilst this obviously is good, the law enforcement in the country is obviously doing its job. Those animals are still dead. This is the equivalent to the poaching of one pangolin roughly every 18.5 minutes in Africa. And like I said before, once they get the specimens, once they've intercepted the trade, there is little being done to actually find out who sent the pangolin scales, for example, who put those scales on the ship that we then found, these thousands of scales inside the container. Two record-breaking seizures also occurred in Hong Kong of rhino horn in both February and April of 2019. The first comprised 24 rhino horns, which amounted to 40 kg, and they were seized from two passengers en route to Vietnam. This marked the largest seizure to date until the second seizure in April of 82.5 kg of rhino horn from a transshipment cargo at Hong Kong International Airport. This seizure is estimated by the government to be worth 16.5 million Hong Kong dollars and represents the killing of around 14 white or 31 black rhinos. And the numbers are just absolutely staggering. For those interested, pangolin scales are used within Chinese traditional medicine to help drain pus and to relieve skin diseases, whereas rhino horn, on the other hand, is used based on claims that it can cure cancer or act as an aphrodisiac. Rhino horn is made out of keratin. That's the same stuff our fingernails is made out of. There is absolutely zero scientific evidence that it helps with any of these kind of ailments. And it's obviously causing a huge conservation challenge in Africa and causing for these species to potentially become ones that we just show to our kids in picture books, which is just so incredibly sad. So whilst obviously what we've been speaking about, Bella, is incredibly important to understanding how situations on the ground cause conservation challenges for many species, for example, trophy hunting and obviously the poaching on the ground in countries such as Africa, I'm incredibly passionate about raising education levels and tackling the demand side of the trade and just educating people about the detrimental effects that certain traditions have on these species. So if we could help reduce the demand, then there would obviously be very little need for the supply.
Thanks. That's so insightful, and it's really great to hear another angle to the hunting and trafficking issue. You don't often think, well, why has this problem arisen that we spoke about? So thank you for that. Jake's now going to tell us about bat conservation and surveying. Did you know that bats make up a quarter of all mammals? Yeah, you heard that right. A quarter of all mammals on Earth are bats. There are more than 1,100 species of bat in the world.
That is a lot of bats. Here's Jake's input on white nose syndrome in bats and how one professor is using sound to sample populations and investigate how bats travel within a landscape and use the resources within it.
And I sometimes just think about, like, what is it that we don't know, right? Because you can never know what you don't know. And it's these tools that are so simple that are just literally opening windows for us into the natural world.
In thinking about managing populations of wildlife, it is important to be able to track the activity of wildlife populations across a landscape. This can often be a challenging task, but one researcher is using a somewhat simple way to monitor activity of bat populations on such a scale. Dr. Martina Kalkunis-Rappel is a professor of biology and dean of science at the University of Alberta. She spoke with me recently about her research studying bat activity using microphones.
My research is all about the bioacoustics of bats and mice. And so I'm a biologist, a field biologist that studies both of those groups out in the field at night in the dark. And the way that I study them is through listening to their sounds. So one of the things that we were really interested, or my group was really interested in understanding early in my career, was how bats used water. And there are some different applied and conservation reasons for this, but it's a really simple question. Do bats use the same kind of water sources across the landscape, or are there particular species-specific needs? We go out in the afternoon and we set up a pole with one of those microphones at the very tip of the pole, and we put this, instead of in an individual mouse's territory, we put many of these microphones spread out across the landscape. They're recording anything that's making sound at night in the sky, and the things that make sound at night in the sky are bats. Different bat species have different spectral and temporal characteristics associated with their calls.
So I was wondering, what have you learned by studying bats on this landscape scale and thinking about how their differences in the sounds they make and their vocalizations?
Sure. We found this really interesting result that one species of bat would be found feeding more often downstream of the city, and the other species would be found more often feeding upstream of the city, and the rest of the species, it was just sort of random. They're looking for insects, and there's different insects in sort of eutrophic, nutrient-rich waters versus clear waters. But the other thing that it shows is that you can look at a large landscape and say, this species of bat really is a species that actually prefers foraging over relatively low quality water, probably because of the insects that are there. And the interesting part of this story is that that species is a species that has been heavily impacted by white nose syndrome. And white nose syndrome is this syndrome that has been really devastating for bats in North America. And when we think about our policies for conserving that species or mitigating the effects of a disease like white nose syndrome, we can't just assume that we need habitat or even an area that is really pristine, because that species actually prefers to be foraging in areas of relatively low water quality. So it's something that you wouldn't normally think about, but all of these different bat species have different requirements, and those requirements are wildly different and probably outside of what we would have expected. So that's something that I think is interesting, and you can only answer those kinds of questions by sampling at a very large scale.
I really do love bats. I know it sounds silly, but they're just so cute and so misunderstood, and there's so much variety within the species.
Interesting, Jake. Thank you. A listener actually just commented saying, what about sharks and shark fin in terms of the illegal wildlife trafficking trade? Yes, and there is so much that we could get into, and an hour show just isn't long enough, so we promised to kind of revisit this topic. But I suppose what we hope to get across is that we've just got to respect our natural world, and there is so much that we need to conserve and protect, and we hope that this gives you a newfound appreciation for lots of animals, including the little bats that fly around. So I think it's now time for another song, and this is Riding the Wave by Day Fox. That was Riding the Wave by Day Fox. You can find them on YouTube by searching Day Fox, all one word. Next up, we have Franco Pesci, who will tell us some of the most bonkers facts about animals from the last year.
As 2020 comes to a close, animal lovers should rejoice that the past year was full of incredible, heartwarming and hilarious stories about our furry friends. Here are some stories that will make us laugh, cry, and restore faith in humanity. Dog accidentally enters half marathon and finishes 7th. On January 16, April Hamlin let her dog outside to do business, but she kept running. According to Runner's World, Ludwig kept running until she ran into the Elkmond half marathon and unknowingly joining the race. Ludwig ran the entire 13.1 mile course in 1 hour, 32 minutes, 56 seconds. Out of 165 finishers, she placed 7th overall. A dog without paws becomes a therapy animal for amputee patients. Don't ever question who can define the odds. That's what Animal Rescue Group Army President and founder Shannon Keefe had to say about Kiki, a dog that has a new lease on life and a new family in the United States. Kiki was found inside a trash bag near a black market meat trader in South Korea. According to rescuers, she was barely breathing and all 4 legs bound with wire. She was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors declared that the only way to save her will be to amputate all 4 of her paws. Losing her paws has not diminished Kiki's energy or spirit. Just a day after her surgery, she was ready to be up and about, playing with toys. Kiki is now living with her new family in Arizona. Her new owners hope to certify Kiki as a therapy dog, so she can visit amputee patients. A class of high school students gave teacher kittens after learning her cat died. Texas high school teacher Tonya Andrews went from tears of grief one day during class to tears of joy the next. The day after telling her students that her beloved cat has passed away, they brought her 2 kittens. The sweet story began a week prior, during Andrews' statistics class at Joshua High School. When Andrews began to cry in class, the students asked her what was wrong, and she replied that their 16-year-old cat, Blondie, had passed away. She kind of lost it and started bawling at that point, one of the students told ABC News. So the group of students started brainstorming ideas and ways to cheer her up. They decided on flowers, balloons, cupcakes, and a couple of adorable little kittens. One of the classroom moms helped the group research where to find kittens needing a home in Fort Worth area. The students shared a video on social media of the heartwarming moment they delivered Andrew's new kittens. Another fun story worth mentioning was that New Zealand recruited a saxophonist to get endangered birds in a sexy mood. The kakapoo is a rather dozy, flyless bird from New Zealand. It's also critically endangered. So this year, the Department for Conservation hired a saxophonist to get our kakapoo in the mood. It was a bit of a PR stunt, but a 23-year-old musician was duly hired and dubbed New Zealand's sexiest saxophonist. Stunt or not, it may just have worked. This year, 76 chicks were hatched, doubling the number of 2019.
So there you have it, some very unusual and uplifting stories about animals and a very sexy saxophonist.
We have time for one last song today. This is Surfing Lonely by Sandy Nunn.
Sunsets closing down the bay. Dry myself off, slim my baby back on my shoulders. Surfing lonely knows how to wash my problems, but not to get rid because she's found someone new. Right now all I've got to hold is the ocean. I wanna be friends with you, so tell me something new. Time's up by the tide, but I'm getting closer to finding the meaning of all of the lonely suffer. And when I get there, I hope that I'm bolder and all of my problems live under the ocean. Anyway, catch the waves and ride the days away. Looks like sunsets closing down the bay. Dry myself off, swing my baby back on my shoulders. Goodbye. It's okay. Let the arrow of time do its thing. When it's sunrise, I'll be here again. Riding alone, I'm the king of the loneliest surfers.
That was Surfing Lonely by Sandy Nunn. If you like that track, then you can follow him on Facebook by searching Sandy Nunn.
And that's the end of this week's episode of Science at One. Thank you so much for listening to us all term.
If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. And while sadly this is the last episode of Science at One this year, you can hear more from the Science Communication Unit by visiting isciencemag.co.uk.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and we hope whatever you get up to over this Christmas holidays that you stay safe and have a lovely time.